So we're going to start in like 2 minutes.
Okay.
You going to come in?
Yes, I will.
Okay, amazing. Hi. Yeah, I think he said he needed 1 minute for the video. The IT. Yeah, he said he just needed 1 minute to set up the video. And then he gave me the thumbs up.
Thanks everybody for coming. We're going to get started. Everybody yell out a holler if you can hear me. Say woohoo! Woohoo! All right, good. So let's get started, everybody. My name is Daria Mozaffarian, the Dean of the school. I'm really pleased to introduce Daina Trout. Daina Trout, among her many accomplishments, is an alum of our school, graduating in 2007. And she, when she graduated, did a series of different things, including working on omega-3s and working for various businesses. And then she decided she wanted to start her own company. And this talk is going to be about that journey and what she learned and why she did it. She's the CEO of Health Aid Kombucha, which she founded in 2012, so just 5 years ago. She founded it with her husband, Justin Trout, and her best friend, Vanessa Du, and all three of them are still executives at the company. She also last year hired Amelia Winslow, who is also 2007 class from the Friedman School, to run food policy. So really from the FPAN program. Which program were you in when you were here?
I was in nutritional biochem.
Okay, so
and
she
then
was in
public health as well.
She was in BMN. Great. So she received her BS from Georgetown and the dual degrees, MS and MPH from Tufts. And she really wanted to do something entrepreneurial to make the world a better place. And so she is going to tell us about kombucha, which has become the fastest growing brand in the industry. Last year, she sold 18 million bottles, we figured out. Is that right?
That'll be this year.
This year they're going to sell 18 million bottles of kombucha tea. So we really look forward to Daina. And Daina is also excited about joining our group of entrepreneurship advisors, who is going to help with students who want to think about how to bring together an idea with human capital and other capital to get their idea launched. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that introduction. It's so good to be back. I took many classes in those seats right there. And not a lot has changed, actually, so good to see you. So when I was at Tufts, my inner idealistic nutritionist was definitely in the driver's seat. I was passionate about food, probably like you. I loved eating it. I loved learning about it. I loved making it. And I loved healing with it. My boyfriend, who's now my husband and co-founder of the business, I met him at Berklee College of Music halfway through Tufts, had really bad acid reflux. He almost couldn't hold anything down, caused him a lot of pain, and he was about to go on drugs for life from the docs. And being wide-eyed and bushy-tailed nutritionist, I was really excited to heal him with food instead. So I asked him for 6 weeks, and he agreed. And unfortunately, nothing worked. I tried everything, even the probiotic pills, the really expensive ones made his tummy hurt. I did a little more research and found that perhaps fermenting food, authentic fermentation, could be a solution. And so I learned how to make kombucha when I was at Tufts. Sauerkraut, kefir, yogurt, real yogurt. And I decided to try it, of course, on my guinea pig, and it worked. In fact, 2 days later, the symptoms were pretty much gone, and they never came back as long as he continued to eat fermented foods in his diet. It was pretty powerful for me back then. I tried it on a few other friends / guinea pigs, and though the results weren't always as dramatic, I always found that it made people feel better, feel good. They liked it, it uplifted them. And if they had any kind of tummy problems, they seemed to subside or at least, or even go away. So I knew, especially being in school, that the amount of science it would take for, to catch up to my idea of bringing this to the masses was years and years and years. And I was already convinced by my sample size of 3. But I didn't yet have the courage to start it. I was excited, though, not just because I had an idea. I think maybe like many of you, there was something in me that knew my path was somehow in entrepreneurship, but I didn't know exactly how. I was excited because I hated the way the grocery shelf looked. You could get real food in the produce section, but as soon as you go to the aisles, it's hyper pasteurized, it's super processed, and even if it's slapped with an organic sticker or seal, or the word natural, or it's made in that like craft paper brown and, you know, looks very natural, really is very dead. And I thought that we deserved more than that. I certainly didn't think that we were going to get any less busy as a population. And so the thought, though I loved the idea of slow food and people making their own kombucha and making everything from scratch, though I loved that, I didn't see that that was really feasible, considering how much more we're working these days. So instead, I fantasized about bringing that real food to the commercial shelf, which was dead. And in that space, I thought, well, what if fermented food could be the first to come to that place? Because assuming it's safe, and there's a lot of inherent properties in fermented food that make it safe, we'll talk about those later, assuming it's safe, why couldn't it be available to everyone, everywhere? And if I knew how to make kombucha, I could be one of the first companies to do that. And that's how it all started. What if consumers could actually have it all? So it took 5 years after graduating Tufts to actually gain the courage. Anna moved to Los Angeles to gain the courage to start. But in 2012, my husband Justin, my best friend Vanessa, and I started brewing authentic kombucha in our tiny apartment closet and selling in the farmers markets in LA. We had about $600 to put toward the effort, so it was a whole lot of physical labor. And fast forward 5 years later to today, we're the fastest growing brand in the category. We're sold now in 10,000 stores in every state in the US, including Walmart, Target, Costco. We have over 107 employees, one of which is my photographer today. And we'll sell, 1.5 million cases this year. And this week alone, we already sold 65,000, which is a record. So it's pretty awesome. And all of that started with a small credit card and a big dream. And the dream I had back at Tufts was, how do you bring real food to the commercial shelf? So before we get into that, I feel like we should just cover what the heck kombucha is anyway, because I think 95% of people don't even know what it is. So I'll do my best to describe it. First, let me take a sip. Did you guys get some kombucha out there? Awesome, I got a thumbs up. One person got kombucha. So kombucha is fermented tea. Basically, it naturally contains probiotics and healthy organic acids. It starts with 4 ingredients: sugar, tea, water, so basically sweet tea. And then there's a VIP ingredient, a mysterious ingredient called the SCOBY. Stands for symbiotic culture of bacteria and yeast. Basically, it's a cellulose matrix that holds bacteria, yeast, and enzymes that ultimately are going to eat the sugar and turn that sweet tea into kombucha. The process basically goes like this. You put all 4 ingredients into a vessel. We'll talk about why glass is best a little bit later, but you put these 4 ingredients into a vessel and you let it sit. And it basically can take, on average, I would say about 4 weeks to really develop all the way. And what actually happens is the yeasts come down from that SCOBY once they get introduced to the sugar. They eat the sugar, and in exchange they make 2 things: carbon dioxide, or bubbles, and ethanol. The bacteria then come down, eat the ethanol, and make an assortment of different acids. And in kombucha, the acids that can be found are called like gluconic acid, glucuronic acid, malic acid, tartaric acid, acetic acid, actually a whole assortment of 20 or more different types of acids. And in the end, when you get the beverage, it's a little bubbly from that carbon dioxide, but natural bubbles, it's not forced carbonated, or at least ours isn't. And it has these probiotics, these bacteria, these yeast, these enzymes that exist in that SCOBY in the beverage, as well as these acids that have now developed. So it's slightly sweet, slightly vinegary, a lot less sugar than soda. Certainly, to me, it's an alternative to soda, and perhaps maybe even ancient soda, because we certainly didn't create this. I'm not going to talk today about health aid, although I would love to. I'm going to talk more about the process and what it's been like bringing Health-Ade to the marketplace, but just so that you understand our position in that market, we are the authentically real kombucha. That's what we stand for. And even back in the farmers market days, we committed to making real kombucha, and that's been a really hard commitment to stick to as we've grown to this size. And that's what I want to talk to you guys about today. And we will, in turn, cover all the things that we end up doing differently as I discuss the challenges. So today will be all about those challenges, bringing real food to the commercial space. And I remember when I first started making kombucha, who here has made kombucha? Okay, so pretty easy and simple to make, right? You just have to kind of keep attending to it, right? Well, when you start manufacturing things, it's a whole nother world. And especially since we flavor with cold pressed juice, now essentially I'm a cold pressed juice company as well. All the states have different laws. We'll talk about ethanol. But the reality check was my very exciting sort of like, we can do this, it's just, you just make more kombucha, was really met by a lot of reality checks. And those were basically in 4 major categories: manufacturing, scientific and analytical challenges, political challenges, and then sales and marketing challenges. And I'll touch on each of these. And I want to make sure we have for questions, because perhaps you guys want to know about a different part of the journey. And I can speak to it all. The good news is, though you might get a little depressed in those challenging slides, the end is a positive one. There is a silver lining. It is working. It is worth it. And even you guys can help. So let's jump in. Okay, manufacturing challenges. Well, for kombucha at least, and that's really all I know about, the right way, unfortunately, is the hard way. And I bet that if you were to apply that question to any food category, it would probably be what they would say as well. The right way to do it is, in fact, okay, good, we've got a scan starting. The right way is, in fact, the hard way. Specifically for us, let's talk about what some of those things are. So first, fermentation. It takes time. A bottle of kombucha, depending on the temperature, as you guys know in Boston, I remember I used to make it in the summer and it'd be like ready in 2 weeks, and then the winter was like 2 months. It can take on average about 4+ weeks to make one bottle. There are all kinds of chemicals, 650 to be exact, that you can put into wine and beer and food to hasten fermentation or to somehow augment it and like get it to happen bigger and faster. That they sell you. First thing they say is, you don't have to put it on the label. And as a nutritionist, that was like appalling to me, you know, because not only personally, because I don't want to consume things like that, but also as a business, how am I supposed to differentiate myself from my competitor if they're choosing to put 200 chemicals in there that they don't have to put on the label, so that their fermentation time is cut down to 1 week or even 0 days, you know, but we both have the name kombucha on the label. Glass, I mentioned the vessel you ferment in. Those of you fermenting kombucha, I'm curious, what vessels do you guys use? Like what types? Glass? Glass, okay, yeah. So that's what they teach you. When you look online, you see glass jars. Unfortunately, the majority of kombucha sold in the US is fermented in plastic. Now, it's sold to you in glass. So that's kind of misleading, I would think, because at that point it's already done fermentation. But as you guys know, when you basically ferment kombucha, you put it into a hot room so that you can standardize the temperature, and the acids develop. And it's a really acidic product. It's actually as acidic as lemon juice. So if you were to pour acids on plastic and put it in a hot room, that's pretty much how you want it to leak. That's like actually how you get it to leak petroleum. So for me, that was like not something we were gonna do if we were out here to be making real food, right? Couldn't believe that was how people were making it. In fact, we're the only ones that make it in glass. So that means everyone else is using either plastic or at least stainless steel, which still, by the way, corrodes with acids. That's why in beautiful Italy, and you go to Modena, they're not making their great balsamic vinegars. It's steel, it's all plastic fats. Plastic, wow. All glass. So that's a challenge. We do it in super small batches, 2.5 gallons. So we have 250,000 glass jars in our brewery right now. And that looks kind of crazy when you come see it. It looks a little bit like that scene in The Matrix. You guys remember when they like walked up and there were all those bodies. That's kind of how it is, and it's odd to see that many small jars, and a lot of people come in and say that's not, you weren't smart in how you scaled that, but the way I look at it is, well, my consumer cares about that stuff, and as soon as I started expanding the vat size, it wasn't fermenting properly. So if I didn't want to adulterate the product, for me, this was the size I had to do it in, and instead of compromising on that, I focused my efforts on figuring out how to make that efficient. And once we've shifted our focus on figuring out how to make that efficient, and in effect, how do we be innovative in making it the ancient way, we were able to find solutions. And we can compete. I mean, we're more premium, certainly, than the other guys, but only by sometimes 15 more cents. So it's not something I think the consumer is really, it's not a prohibitive difference at this point, although for a while it was maybe even a couple bucks more. We flavor with things like cold pressed juice. That's a whole thing. We got a whole different public health profile in your brewery when you're contracting with farms, bringing farm produce in, cold pressing it yourself, and putting raw juice into the kombucha. You've got to prove that it doesn't need to be pasteurized. That's a really expensive effort, and you want to also be sure that you're right. But again, I think my consumer cares about that, so I'm going to do that. And then finally, fermentation happens on its own schedule. Sometimes it'll take 4 weeks in a day. Sometimes it'll take 3 weeks and 5 days. And that's a really big challenge when you're scaling a product. Other companies are starting to cave. That makes it a really big challenge as well, because now you're holding on to something that you want, that you hold so important to you, but these other companies are now adding these chemicals. They're able to drop the price, and the consumer is only able to see that on the shelf. You've got about 1 inch on the label. Some more challenges. There's a lot of disadvantages to doing it like this. It costs more money, so it's going to cost the consumer more money, and it takes a lot longer. And then a thing that I think I didn't realize in school was how much the buyers affect this process. So to us, there are two customers. There's you, consumers, that actually purchase the product. There's a whole other customer, which is the buyer at the store. And they're the ones that actually give you access to the consumer. So they're a very important piece of this puzzle. And in the prepackaged world, this is not the produce world where, it wasn't a really great rain season this year, so the pomegranates are going to be a couple weeks late. They understand that there. In the packaged world, if they order it Tuesday, they want it Tuesday. And the problem with kombucha and real live fermented foods like kombucha, it's not always that exact. It might have to come on Wednesday. And the buyers do not like that. And especially when the other companies cave, they're like, well, blank product can do it, and they're always shipping their products easily every single time, so it's just easier for us to go with them. And you have to really make a case for why the consumers will come to your store to buy that product, despite the fact that we're shorting orders sometimes. And obviously we have to do our best. And then of course it's not predictable for us. I can't tell you how many Saturdays and Sundays I have to go in and forklift in 600 pallets of product, because that was when it decided to be ready. So that's just a few of the manufacturing challenges. Jumping into, and I'm sorry, this part's depressing, but I promise you there is a positive end to this. Some scientific and analytical challenges to making real food, at least real kombucha. So nutrition facts panel, we love this, right? This is something that now communicates to the consumer the truth of what's inside the label. Well, some things that were surprising to me coming out of school is, first, there is no regulatory board that approves the nutrition facts panel or the ingredients panel when you go and sell a product. In fact, the whole farmers market world, I didn't even have a nutrition facts panel on the product because we scotch tape it on. We would scotch tape on the label, and the consumer didn't seem to care about that back then. So the level of truth on that label is very much dependent on the company leaders. And then only when a legal problem happens, like a class action lawsuit, will often the companies actually be forced to change. The FDA does not have time for this, obviously. So that's in and of itself just one problem, which I think affects all food. But let's just talk about fermented food. By definition, it changes. And the whole point of the nutrition facts panel is you're supposed to know exactly what is in there when you drink it or when you eat it, right? So let's take carrots for a second. If I were to, you're allowed to be 20% off. Okay, so let's take carrots for a second. Let's say I were to tell you that it was 30% off on the amount of vitamin A because it was picked in August versus March. As a consumer, you're like, yeah, I would expect that. You're raising carrots, and March probably isn't as good as a season as August, or maybe this farm is better than that farm, so the carrot's gonna have a different amount of vitamin A in it. But in prepackaged food, it is like not allowed. It is so litigiously regulated, like if you're even 25% off, just wait for your class action lawsuit that is gonna say, oh, you're actually 2.5 grams or 2.8 grams of sugar instead of the allowable 2.4 grams of sugar that you're allowed if you say 2. Does that make sense? So it's really scary, especially if you're fermented food, because by definition, it's supposed to change. It's not gonna change a ton, like I'm not saying it's gonna go from 20 to 10 grams, but it might go from 2 to 1 in the lifetime of the product on the shelf, and technically that's illegal. So the nutrition facts panel in a lot of ways was designed for a pasteurized food world that didn't change. And as these fermented foods come onto the shelf, and as other live foods come onto the shelf that will change over time, I suspect, or at least I would like to see some change in the leniency of that law. And even Dari was suggesting, what if it said 1 to 2 grams? Like it gave you a range so that as a consumer you were like, okay, I can accept that. And perhaps that's the solution. But right now it is not set up to do this at all. And to like talk to the FDA, it's not like, right? So like we've been in line to to create a statement of identity for kombucha, because that's part of the problem. People can just basically bottle vinegar, sprinkle in probiotics and call it kombucha. And that's what I hired Amelia for, by the way, to help me create these centers of identity. We're on a list of 1,500 companies trying to create a statement of identity, and it's not looking like the line is getting any shorter. So real food has variation, but yet our facts panel doesn't exactly support that. Also, most foods, especially in the packaged food world, need some kind of protection from foodborne illness. That's why pasteurization occurs. And I think in some instances it's obviously very necessary. But what's interesting about fermented foods is there's some inherent properties in fermentation that actually protect against these pertinent pathogens. So not just the acidic nature of kombucha, which remember takes 4 weeks for those acids to fully develop, and you can easily control pH. I mean, that's not a difficult thing to control in your brewery. So it's not like hard to avoid things like mold and pertinent pathogens if you're following the proper process and protocols. It certainly doesn't take like a lot of money even to do that either. We've all used pH strips before. So the acids do it, but then also there's some new evidence to suggest that some of these probiotics actually fight. Like the good guys fight the bad guys, and nobody really fully understands that. But when you allow the natural process to occur, somehow I can inject E. coli to a bottle off the shelf, and it will be just as strong at killing off E. coli, the 5-log reduction, as pasteurization. It's pretty powerful stuff. But if I'm now forced to engineer this process, and maybe sprinkle in a little bit of this or sprinkle a little bit of that, I don't really know how that's affecting that whole awesome natural process. So for me, I'm like very hesitant to try anything like that, and it scares me a bit that other kombucha companies are so openly doing that stuff when they don't know the impact. And my fear is that a foodborne illness might occur and it'll be blamed on all of the kombucha world, but if they had just not engineered it in the first place, it might not have ever happened. So it's a really interesting space in science. And then methods of analysis are not really that precise. We have awesome science now. I mean, when we go to the labs here, I'm sure that we're able to get to the most, minor level an understanding of how much sugar is in a product or how much ethanol is in a product. But when you go to the TTB, the government authority that regulates alcohol, they're not using machinery. They're using, the 1935 glass vessel thing that you learned how to, I forget what that is even called. But it's not like sophisticated, it's like a $7 thing. And yet you're held to a level of like 0.2%. You got to be like within 0.2% specificity. it's like kind of not, it's not meeting the standard, right? So, and then the other thing about fermented foods is like, it's all in a change, right? So like the sugar gets changed over time. So the ethanol in the process of turning from ethanol into an organic acid can be misinterpreted by some of these less sophisticated machines. And so you can over and underestimate the amount of product. So like just to mention one example, I went to one lab and tested the B12 and it came up at 12,000% the RDA. And I was like, I'm just not gonna put that on the label, I'm gonna test that again. And then I tested another bottle at a different lab and it came back at 12%. Is there really that much variation in the kombucha, or is there something happening with these two lab technicians in how they're testing the B12? And then when I started researching this, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a whole can of worms. There are like so many different forms of B12. Some only test one kind and not the other, the synthetic and then the non-synthetic kinds. And oh, by the way, it also really looks like this molecule. And we weren't looking at that one, so let us redo this. And I'm just like, whoa, this is happening across probably all fermented foods, and yet, you know, we got to put this on the label. So it's tough. And it's one of the reasons I still don't have a number next to B12, because, you know, which one do you put? Like an average? You know? It would be the single richest source of B12, you know, in the universe. Somehow I don't think that's right. Okay, and then there's the political challenges, and this is one of the things I hired Amelia to help me with. And there are so many. I'm going to just speak to the ethanol one, because it's been sort of a really interesting one as it's played out. The background on this is fermented foods make alcohol. Remember, the yeasts eat the sugar and make CO2 and alcohol, okay? The bacteria eat the alcohol and turn it into acids. That's how that kombucha creates the vinegars. So it's a little bit self-limiting. It's never going to just keep going in alcohol. But the alcohol does over the process of the fermentation cycle, like kind of go up and down, up and down, up and down, and then it goes all the way to zero when it's a straight vinegar. The tax law, by the way, the alcohol law, which by the way is a tax law, which maybe I was surprised to learn that, is 0.5%, line in the sand. Under 0.5%, you are non-alcoholic. Above 0.5%, you are a spirit. 0.5% is a really small amount of alcohol. And it was picked out of the sky in 1937 or something, post-prohibition, when they were like, oh, we're just gonna, you know, draw this line in the sand. And I think the intent was positive. We're trying to protect people from inebriation when they don't want to be inebriated. And we're gonna tax alcohol. But they didn't even have the methods back then to test something at 0.5% specificity. So, you know, that wasn't exactly a smart law to pick, or a smart number to pick. And today, we do have potentially sophisticated enough machinery and equipment to test that, but it's not what the TTB is using. So kombucha might be above 0.5%, depending on what method you use. And that's a really tough space to be in, because now you're a spirit. And if you're a spirit, it's not just as simple as saying, oh, I'm an alcoholic product. You guys know in Massachusetts where you can buy liquor and where you can't, right? And by the way, your distributors that are food distributors cannot sell liquor. They don't have the licenses to do that. So now you got to find all new distributors. You can't even sell on Sundays. I mean, does that make sense for fermented food? And so we've tested pickle juice. We've tested sauerkraut juice. It's all the same problem. There's a slight amount of alcohol that's probably not always going to be exactly 0.5%, but we're not talking 3. Maybe it's 0.8. Maybe it's 0.3, but it's not likely to be getting you drunk. And I think that's why I put the question there, what is the law protecting? Because I think if we ask that question instead, we say, well, we just want to know when we're drinking something that's going to inebriate us. And then you can logically say, well, nobody's chugging on apple cider vinegar to get drunk. So maybe there's a leniency we could offer here for fermented foods. And that's what Amelia's working on. The only way to remove alcohol in kombucha and fermented foods is to kill the yeasts. The only way to kill the yeasts is with heat or pressure or chemicals. Now, when I apply heat or pressure, guess what else I kill? All the other good stuff in there, right? So what you've got in the kombucha world right now, when I say the company's caving, they're basically pasteurizing or pressure treating their kombucha and then sprinkling back in some probiotic they engineered in a lab, bubbling it and selling it to you as that. but that's not really what you think you're buying, probably. And for me, I don't see the reason for it, because it's not any more safe. In fact, we've just now inherently killed potentially some of the natural protection, and we're sprinkling in some probiotic that often isn't even, like kombucha has tons of different kinds of bugs in it, and they all live in symbiosis together. So just to sprinkle one bug in there, to me, is kind of like, well, okay, but are you even sure that that bug likes that environment? You know, because that's a really important thing to consider when you're doing probiotics. There's just so much to think about. So again, if in fact the law passes to say that you have to kill these yeasts to protect the ethanol because it has to be under 0.5%, you're going to be forcing brands to pasteurize, you're going to be forcing brands to sprinkle in engineered probiotics, and you're going to be forcing brands to force carbonate. Those yeasts also create bubbles. So for me, I'm like, let's change the law, right? And that's what Amelia is helping me do, and that's what's so important about all the work that we can do as nutritionists. So I'll let you know how that happens. And then, you know, though I would say, go out and tell everyone about this law, let's get it passed, I'm actually like, shh, don't tell anyone. The reason is that you can't make it a big deal. Because if I wave the red flag to say I might be 0.6% alcohol, guess who's getting a class action lawsuit tomorrow? So you have to do this all strategically and with really smart people that you trust. And I obviously just trust all of you because I've just told all of you, but it is, you know. So it's difficult. And like, you know, one of the things we're up against is the competitors that have made the changes. They don't want this law to pass because they've just invested $5 million in their new filling line that does all the stuff. So they're like, no, like that, I have a competitive advantage over you now because I'm safe. So it's a really interesting space. It's not so simple. And then, you know, ultimately you have 20 seconds with the buyer and 5 seconds with the consumer. Quick, what do you say? Like, where do you even start, right? Especially when your competitors are caving, you're the only one left, it feels like, fighting for real food in the space. You want to grow the category long term, so you're not trying to shoot people down within it. Quick, what do you say? It's a really, really big challenge. And I've got 56 salespeople looking to me for the direction. So it's a really big challenge. Okay. Hold on, let me have a sip. There is good news. The good news is it's working. So it's really helpful when you're trying to lead this quest to get some positive feedback and reinforcement from the consumers. And to me, this was one of the most important just because, you know, back at Tufts, I never thought that Forbes could even be something that we would be recognized from. And just last week, Food & Wine recognized us as the most innovative product of the year. And I'm like, innovative? We're ancient. We're not innovative. But then I'm like, wait, I kind of see how we're innovative because we're figuring out how to still make this ancient food but scale it. So I'll take it. So yeah, Health Aids on Fuego. We're growing crazy fast. It's insane, 400% this year. The fastest growing category in the brand. It's awesome. It's really awesome. But what I didn't want to do is just stand up here and start with this because there is a lot that goes into that success. And I'm glad to hear that people do care. So Forbes, they're not exactly a scientific entity, but they've deemed us the #1 overall health benefits, which, you know what, I'll take it. But I think that's pretty cool. And there's more as well. We get press often, organic press often, and look, even Khloe Kardashian wears it, or drinks it. Is that Khloe? I never know. Anyway, so it's pretty cool stuff. Okay, so what can you do about it? I kind of see the people in this room in two ways. I see you as an influencer. As a nutritionist, you really are an influencer. And then as well as a consumer. So as a nutritionist champion, as an influencer, you can build, and you're interested in entrepreneurship, build companies that make the changes you want to see. Build solutions to the problems you see out there. It can absolutely be done, and it doesn't take, well, it does take a lot of money. We've gotten a lot of investment, but to start, it was $600. Dedicate yourself to what you care. Don't sway. The temptations and the challenges will come. They continue to come for me. And I actually think the reason we've gotten this press and we've gotten this successful is that we didn't sway from that. Make opportunities for change, fight for what you want, and influence others. Tell others, because they look to you because you're knowledgeable about food and about nutrition. Even if you're not sold on the kombucha thing, whatever it is you're sold on, you actually have a microphone. And so it's important you understand that. And then, of course, as a consumer, every dollar is a vote. And ultimately, that is what makes businesses go, is money. I was talking to Daria earlier. Money is like air to a business. You don't actually breathe air for your life purpose, but yet you need it every single second. So business is the same way with money. It's air to the business. So it's important we get comfortable with money, and the more profitable a business can become, if it wants to do good, can do more good and make more of an impact. And that actually is all up to the company founder and the company leaders. So I thought it would be kind of cool to finish with a feel-good video. So hold on. It's only 60 seconds, and then I'm gonna bring it up for questions.
It's not a means to an end. It's a means to a beginning. Of feeling good, living better, being more healthy. How healthy? Well, that's entirely up to you. You see, we want you to be healthy, but to the point of happy. No more, no less, no rules. For some, this could get pretty scientific and technical. That's cool. We can go there. For the rest of us, for the most of us, it's about feeling great. Or maybe just better. It's up to you. And that's the exact amount of kombucha you need. How do you know when you've gotten there, achieved it, attained that? You'll know. Just follow your gut. We think it's got a pretty good head on its shoulders.
So for me, that's a little bit my manifesto, because I know there isn't the science yet behind kombucha. And so for me, I was never focused on this as a supplement or a medicine. It's a food, and for some, it's simply just better than soda, which is fine. It's not for me about the science or all the impact it's gonna have on your health, although I'll take any of the research you guys wanna do for me on that. It's more about being happy, picking foods that make you feel good, understanding where the natural process, how important the natural process is in the foods that we eat, and then supporting those. So that's all I had to talk to you about today. I wonder if anybody has any questions. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, hi.
I love your enthusiasm.
Oh, thank you.
I'd like to bottle that.
I did.
As I listened to you talk, it occurred to me that my 3 adult children, one of their, at the moment, favorite TV shows is a program called Goliath.
Okay.
So we have a soul lawyer fighting a big corporation, big law firm. How do you prevent, or how do you differentiate your product? Because as this becomes, Forbes or World and others advertise this, there's going to be more and more demand for kombucha, but your product is better than some other alternatives. How do you differentiate? I mean, what is it? More advertising? I mean, you need brand recognition within this larger portfolio.
So, good question. And I would say in 2 ways. First, don't cave, because as others cave around you, you're only going to become more different. So it is important that there's proof behind the pudding, so to speak. But then it's all marketing. It's all marketing. It's advertising. It's communicating. This morning I had breakfast with 3 Instagram stars so that they could take pictures of the T-shirt and put it up on. I mean, I'm not kidding, though. That's what it takes. And so that they then have 100,000 followers who then say, oh, she drinks that? I'm going to go try it. And then that's the reality of how it works. None of them know about what I just shared with you. Like, none of that process is in there. We do a lot of, I would say the big answer is advertising, influencers, and then press. And you get a press team. Yeah, you get press to pitch it, and they pitch different stories, and when the press team comes to you, they're like, okay, so what, let's talk about how kombucha is so hot right now. And I'm like, okay, sure. Or they want to talk about the female entrepreneur story, which is really cool. And I love to give speaking events on that piece. And by the way, there's a whole, hour-long presentation I can give on that whole journey. And then there's the real food one too, which I think is, for a specific audience.
Can I follow up on that question with regard to differentiation? You're selling a health aesthetic. It's marketing. It's a consumer demand for something which is pure and natural and healthful. We don't really have the evidence that it's helpful for any specific indication, testimonials aside.
Right.
And you told us that the other products are caving, the jargon, for using chemicals or samples of other bugs that you don't know what they are in their products. Now, who's to say, really, that there is any fundamental difference between one product and another in terms of the real evidence? We don't know what the microbial ecology is. We don't know how it affects our health. We don't know what the difference is between the molecules. And as a graduate of our biochemistry program, you know that malic acid is the same in food or in a bottle from Sigma as a chemical entity. So saying chemicals really speaks marketing rather than what we understand from science.
Right.
So how do you deal with that when you're looking at the science and someone wants to lead a health company? You're providing not only happiness and well-being, but health. That's up front and center in your product.
Right. Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think it comes down to the two things. One, the philosophy you have on food as just a person. So for me, my philosophy is that whole food is best. And I'm not waiting for science to prove that to me. So, and because I hold the paintbrush and I chose to paint this canvas, I'm providing this product. I'm not selling it though. I'm very careful not to sell it as a supplement or a medicine. So that's one of the major things of our training. And you'll see if you go into the kombucha space, pick up a bottle of some of the competitors and see what they're telling you it will do. It's often referred to as like a miracle drug or the miracle fungus or something like that. But we're very careful to use this kind of messaging, which is, why don't you see how it makes you feel? And ultimately, I feel like I personally feel like it's a healthful move to pick an orange over any kind of engineered vitamin, personally, even if 1,001 studies tell me that's going to be a better form of vitamin C. My personal opinion is that over time, that's all going to be worked out and we're going to come back to the orange. And so I make real kombucha because I believe in that. But I'm careful never to sell it as what is it going to actually impact? Oh, absolutely. I would love to.
With an accelerated fermentation process.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And what's known about those differences?
Nothing. Yeah. I mean, evidentially nothing. But I can tell you that people run to me from across the store to tell me how no other brand makes them feel good. So again, I'm not selling it as a digestive aid or anything like that. It's a beverage. It's very clearly a beverage. And the way I kind of position it is an alternative to soda. So even if there is no benefit, to me, it's less sugar. It's not force carbonated. And again, it's making people feel good. So I'm kind of like, that's how I'm positioning it right now. It's about how it makes you feel as an individual. But I think it would be great to support that with science. The other interesting thing to note about marketing and the people right now, at least millennial behaviors, is they're caring less and less about that evidentiary support. So though I would be exciting.
That's the worry.
Yeah.
That's partly my marketing.
Yeah.
So there's a responsibility there as well.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%.
Thank you for such an excellent talk. I am, full disclosure, obsessed with the podcast How I Built This.
Okay.
I don't know if you're familiar with it, but if you listen to, usually the food-based ones, there's different themes that come out about how people grew their business and what happened. And I'm kind of curious as to what your thoughts are about selling. So if you've been approached to sell.
Oh, yeah. I'm glad you asked that because he asked me to speak to this. So when I was in your seats, sorry, should I let you finish the question?
No,
That was the question. Okay, so when I was in your seat, the nutritionist from McDonald's came, and we were front row with a box of tomatoes, ready to she sold out to the devil. And I learned a very important lesson in that talk, which is that in that role, with that level of support and impact, like accessibility to impact, she was able to actually make a way bigger change than me working, 80 hours a week on the streets in the inner cities was ever going to be able to make. And though I don't think one is more important than the other, I certainly walked away saying, wait, actually you're doing a really important thing over there. I also learned that lesson. Oh, right, because she introduced sliced apples. Oh, you were there. Yes, I know. I remember you guys. Hi. And I remember, she was basically able to change the amount of fruit and vegetable servings that kids ate simply through putting apples into the Happy Meals. So the impact is real. And so instead of saying no McDonald's, what if we approach that instead and said, wait, how can we actually fuel change by partnering? And another example I have is the guy who started Honest Tea, Seth. He's really passionate about organic foods and organic farms. And he was acquired by Coke 10 years ago. He always made organic tea and everything like that. Now he's on the Coke truck. Even me, I was like, I'm never buying that product again. I'm not supporting Coke. Bad, bad, bad. But then after sitting with him for lunch, I realized, wait, since being partnered with Coke, he was able to change the amount of organic farms in the world by a very, very significant amount. Not just because his product started growing that much and demanded green tea farms and black tea farms, but also because he was just passionate about it, and Coke has to give a lot of money away. So he was able to basically take that money and focus it on an effort that he cared about. So now, as a result, I think it's triple the amount of farms or something in the world that exist because of Honest Tea being purchased by Coke. So again, the impact is great. So have I been approached? Yes, it's a really awesome space to be in right now. People want to buy, huge companies want to buy these little companies because guess what's declining in sales? Soda. Diet soda, and they are losing money by the minute. And they are looking for solutions out there that are innovative and what the consumer wants. So, and they don't claim to know how to make these things, so they're not able to be innovative when they're that big. So they are looking at small companies all the time. There's purchases every week. Just 2 days ago, Campbell's bought Chameleon cold brew coffee. Suja was purchased by Coke. Cold pressed juice Suja was purchased by Coke a year ago. All kinds of these purchases are happening. That's just a few that are coming to mind, but there are many. Maple water, coconut waters, all these different innovative solutions that I think are all undeniably better than soda. So to me, it's a step in the right direction, and I'm not afraid of sale. In other words, as long as I can continue to make the changes I want to see, and that would be a very important part of the discussion, I see it as an actual necessity in actually getting globally, to growing globally. Because by the way, even though we're 5 years in and we'll sell 4 million cases next year, we're still not profitable. Because it takes so much money to grow this fast. So it's at the end of the day, you're going to just lose it all. So you do need that larger power in a lot of ways to help you grow. The other option is to grow totally organically, sustainably, slow growth. And there are some people doing that. And I don't know, that's just not happened with our kombucha. It's just been turbo modes in farmers markets. Any other questions? People with pink hair, yeah. Definitely responding. But soon it'll be a little more proactive. So I think naturally that sort of healthier movement or the real food movement is catching on regardless of marketing. People are starting to pick things that make them feel better, and they're starting to look a little bit more into who's making the food and how they're making it. And I don't think that's going to go away. That doesn't seem like something that would be a fad. I don't think we would ever choose something that doesn't make us feel good over something that does. So I think the companies are starting to actually respond to that and create foods for those people, and then maybe tweak their current foods so that they're more amenable to that type of person. So yeah, it's been interesting. We didn't have the sophisticated like marketing at all up until maybe next year we might, to target who our consumer looks like. I mean, I have an idea based on events and stuff who comes in and responds, but we never had that kind of like massive study done where we really understood what the population looked like. I'm actually November 17th going to get first data back on who is buying health aid, what do they look like, and what else do they do, and that'll be really interesting to see. But I already know, based on like some sneak peeks, that at least this, I know that over the age of 35, it's 75% female, and then between 25 and 35, and 25 to 35, it's 50-50, and under 25, it's like 75% male, which to me is like, what? So I'm certainly not like actively marketing to male over female. Like it's not, it hasn't been proactive yet, but certainly if I got some data to show that males are interested, I might, start trying to get it pressed in like GQ Health or Men's Health. You can be very strategic about marketing as well.
I'm wondering how you're doing your sourcing for produce.
Yeah, good question. I didn't get into that.
Also specifically for your teas.
Yeah. So in the beginning, we bought everything at Whole Foods. And the cold pressed juice we bought from the farmer's market, where we bought the produce, and then we put it on like our home Breville. So it's evolved a little bit since then. I just have to tell one really funny story because we didn't want to use our LA tap water, right? So we would go to Whole Foods and buy distilled water. And I had a tiny apartment, so we had to buy it like by the gallon. So, and there was a point where we were making like, a good amount of kombucha. So I would have to take 4 trips to Whole Foods with my Honda Civic and like pack it full of, gallon-sized water. Good news is I did reuse those in a really cool way, but obviously that had to evolve. So we still do buy all of our produce from farms. I try, we have standards. I try to buy it as local as possible, all California if possible. Obviously in season, you're gonna get the best price, so we buy it in bulk and we contract with these farms. The only farm I can't buy produce for, the only produce I can't buy locally in California is ginger, because I'm certified organic and there is no organic ginger in the US, which is crazy. And I have tried to actually fund a farm that, I should say there's no organic ginger that's like large enough to supply us. I think we're gonna press 60,000 pounds of ginger this month. I mean, it's like an insane amount of ginger. But it has to come from 2 places basically, Peru or China. And it's really unfortunate that it has to come from that far. We picked Peru because upon like visiting these farms, I was able to see that one had, let's just say that it was better, at least in my standard. So, but I would love to fund a farm. I've fantasized a lot about a health aid ginger farm and being the first to make like ginger available in the US and supporting those farms, because it is actually pretty easy to make and it would grow here. It's not like there's something special about Peru. So yeah, that was just the produce. So teas, sugar, and the water now is basically our own filtration system in-house. So we take it actually from the tap and then we clean all the stuff out of it. Although I would say it would be nice to be next to a mountain. Yeah, we basically like visit the farm. So right now our green tea comes from a farm in China, in India. Our black tea comes from a farm in China, but ultimately we actually used our partners Whole Foods to help us with this. So because we weren't like, again, super funded, when you're in that business moment, you do your best. So we would connect with Whole Foods, who does have a lot of a footprint. We say, hey, who do you use for your organic black and green teas? And you would see that they went through this huge diligence process to pick them. So then we were kind of like just piggybacking on them and saying, well, would you be nice enough to share your contacts? And they did. And so that was sort of a creative way that we could get, like in lieu of doing all of that stuff ourselves. And then, you got to go visit the farms and actually see for yourself that they were actually fair trade and treating their employees properly and actually organic, because that was a big thing of concern for me. But certainly, as you're thinking about it across other products, certainly, like, it's all because the founder cares or doesn't care. Like, if I didn't do that, you would never know. You know what I mean? So it's like very important that we like scratch one layer deep, or at least that we be the change we want to see. Yeah.
Do you have, if students want to get involved, we've already offered to be on our list of entrepreneurship advisors, so we'll do that. But do you have internships at your company?
Yeah.
And would you,
I didn't even think about that.
Why don't we create a once a year, internship that the students can come into?
I love it. He's an entrepreneur himself, you see. I love it. Let's do it.
Is anybody this summer who wants to go work?
Yeah, so when you come to Los Angeles, I'll put you to work. Make sure you think about that. No, I would love it. I would love it. Yeah, thank you.
We have lunch in 272 for students that want to come have lunch and learn more and have informal conversation with Daina. So thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.